7.1%. That is the number Ryan Kowalski signed next to on the biggest financial commitment of his life. 29 years old, Chicago, Illinois, first home, 30 years, 7.1%. He asked one question before he picked up the pen. Who decided 7.1? The loan officer smiled and said, "That is just where rates are right now." Ryan signed. Because he had no idea there was a real answer. He had no idea that number was not invented by his bank, not chosen by anyone who knows his name, not set in any room where anyone thought about him specifically. That number came from a market worth $145 trillion, bigger than every stock market on Earth combined. A market that most people have never looked at once in their entire lives. And that market does not just set Ryan's mortgage. It sets your car loan, your landlord's next rent increase. Whether your company can afford to keep you on payroll this month. And whether a retired couple in Portland, Oregon, who did everything right for 65 combined years of work, opens a statement one January morning and finds out they lost $117,000 without touching a single thing. This is not a video about a financial product. This is a video about the machine that has been pricing your life since the day you got your first paycheck, and nobody gave you the manual. My name is Miller, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and the systems that run your financial life, whether you understand them or not. Hit that subscribe button because we do this every couple of days. And stay with me because by the end of this video, you are going to understand why your mortgage costs exactly what it costs, why the safe part of your retirement account can lose more than your stocks in a single year, and what 5 specific things you can do starting this week that most financial advisors never walk you through. But first, I need to take you to Portland, Oregon. David Harmons spent 35 years as a construction engineer. Susan Harmons spent 30 years as a nurse. They were not wealthy. They were not speculative. They were not chasing returns or making aggressive bets. They were two people who did the exact things that every financial professional, every retirement brochure, and every workplace benefits seminar told them to do. Save consistently. Max out your retirement accounts every year. And as you get closer to retirement, shift your portfolio toward bonds because bonds are the safe part. David and Susan retired in January of 2022 with $680,000 in their retirement accounts. $408,000 of that was in bonds, 60% of their total savings. Exactly the allocation their financial advisor recommended for people their age. They had earned this 65 combined years of work, every maxed out individual retirement account, every 401k contribution, every dollar they chose not to spend on something they wanted. $680,000 safe, secure, done. In December of 2022, David opened their year-end account statement, $563,000. He read it again, $563,000, $117,000, gone in 12 months, without a single decision, without a single trade, without touching anything. The safe part of their retirement was what bled. And David Harmon had no idea why. Because in 35 years of working and saving and doing everything right, nobody had ever explained to him how the machine actually works. Let me explain it now, starting from the beginning. Because this is one of those things where if you understand the foundation, everything else clicks into place immediately. A bond is a loan. That is it. Nothing more complicated than that. When the United States government needs to borrow money, it does not go to a bank. It sells bonds directly to investors. You hand over $1,000. The government promises you two things: a fixed interest payment every year called the coupon, and your $1,000 back on a specific date called maturity. Same thing when a corporation needs cash. Same thing when a city needs to fund a water treatment plant. They issue bonds. Investors buy them. Fixed payments, fixed timeline, simple, clean, a loan with a schedule. Now here is the part that changes everything, the part that 90% of people have never had explained to them clearly. Imagine you buy a $1,000 bond that pays 2% interest. That is $20 per year. Fine. You hold it, you collect your $20. Now imagine a year later interest rates rise sharply. New bonds, same $1,000, same borrower, are now paying 5%. $50 per year. You decide you want to sell your bond? You go to find a buyer, and the buyer looks at you and says, "Why would I pay you $1,000 for a bond that pays $20 a year when I can buy a brand new bond for $1,000 that pays $50 a year?" Your bond did not change. It still pays exactly what it promised. But it is now worth less than you paid for it because the world around it changed. The only way to sell it is to lower the price. You lower it until that fixed $20 payment represents roughly 5% of whatever price you sell it at, which means selling your $1,000 bond for somewhere around $400. You just lost $600 on the safe investment. Here is the rule that explains everything that is about to follow. When interest rates go up, existing bond prices go down. When interest rates fall, existing bond prices go up. They move in opposite directions. Always. Without exception. This is not a theory. This is arithmetic. And it is the arithmetic that took $117,000 from David and Susan Harmon in the year 2022. Here is what happened. In 2021, interest rates were near zero. The Federal Reserve had held them artificially low for over a decade. Bonds paid almost nothing, but they were stable and safe, and nobody expected that to change dramatically. Then inflation arrived. And the Federal Reserve did what it does when inflation arrives. It raised rates, fast, from near zero to over 4% in 9 months. One of the fastest rate increases in the history of the Federal Reserve. And by the rule you now understand, rates up, bond prices down, every existing bond in America lost value simultaneously. The broadest United States bond index fell 13% in 2022. The worst performance in its recorded history, going back to 1976. Long-term Treasury bonds lost 39.2% of their value in a single year. Researchers checked records going back to 1754. That was the worst year for those bonds in 268 years of recorded data. The classic retirement portfolio, 60% stocks and 40% bonds, lost approximately 17% in 2022. For the first time since 1974, bonds did not cushion the damage when stocks fell. They made it worse. Millions of people who had done everything right opened their statements and found out the safe part was the problem. David and Susan Harmon were two of those people. Now I want to explain something that David did not know existed. A concept that his financial advisor never mentioned once in 35 years of managing his money. It is called duration. Duration is a measure of how sensitive a bond or a bond fund is to changes in interest rates. It tells you approximately how much the value of a bond drops for every 1 percentage point rise in interest rates. A bond fund with a duration of 3 loses roughly 3% of its value when rates rise 1 point. A bond fund with a duration of 8 loses roughly 8%. A bond fund with a duration of 14 loses roughly 14% for every 1 point rise in rates. In 2022, rates rose more than 4 points. A duration of 14 times a rate rise of 4 points. That is a theoretical maximum exposure of 56%. David and Susan Harmon's bond allocation lost approximately 29% of its value that year, $117,000 from $408,000. Their fund had a duration of 14. They did not know that. The word duration had never been spoken to them in any financial conversation they had ever had. And that word, that single concept, is the difference between understanding what happened to them and being completely blindsided by it. There is another thing the bond market does that almost no one talks about in personal finance conversations. It is the most reliable economic signal in the world, more reliable than any analyst, more reliable than any model, more reliable than almost any institution. Normally, when you lend money for a longer period of time, you earn more interest. That makes intuitive sense. You are waiting longer, you deserve more compensation for the wait. So normally, a 10-year bond pays more than a 2-year bond. This is the standard condition. The yield curve slopes upward. But occasionally something strange happens. Short-term bonds start paying more than long-term ones. The curve inverts. When this happens, it means something very specific. It means the people who manage the largest pools of money on earth, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, are so worried about what is coming in the near future that they are flooding into long-term bonds even at lower rates just to lock in safety. They would rather accept less interest for 10 years than take any risk over the next 2. That signal, an inverted yield curve, has predicted every United States recession since 1955. 9 recessions, 9 correct predictions. 1 false alarm in the 1960s, not a financial commentator, not a think tank, not a forecast. The bond market itself raising its hand and saying something is wrong. And here is why that matters to you directly. The same yield on the 10-year Treasury that determines your mortgage rate is the same signal that tells you whether the economy is about to contract, whether your employer is about to face rising borrowing costs, whether the job market is about to tighten. Ryan Kowalski signed a mortgage at 7.1% because the 10-year Treasury was elevated, the same elevated 10-year Treasury that was signaling economic stress. The same stress that within months led to layoffs across multiple industries. The mortgage rate and the recession warning came from the same number, and nobody told Ryan that either. David Harmon called his financial advisor the morning after he opened the statement. January 2023. 6:45 in the morning Portland time. He had not slept. He asked one question. Why did this happen? And the advisor explained duration. David listened. He understood the math. He is an engineer. The math made sense the moment someone explained it. And then he asked the question that the advisor did not have a good answer for. Why did you never tell me about duration before I needed to know about it? The advisor said most clients do not ask about that level of detail. We manage the allocation based on your age and risk profile. David said, I am not asking why most clients do not ask. I am asking why you never told me. There was a pause. And in that pause, David Harmon understood something that no financial brochure had ever explained to him. Managing money and explaining money are 2 completely different services. He had been paying for one and assuming he was getting both. For 35 years, he had trusted a system that was optimized to manage his assets without ever making him uncomfortable with information he might find alarming. Duration would have been alarming. So it was never mentioned. The system did not fail David because it was malicious. The system failed David because it was never designed to tell him the things he needed to know before they became the things he wished he had known. That is not a David Harmon problem. That is a system problem. And the system is not going to fix itself. Here is what David Harmon knows now that he wishes he had known at 40 years old. 5 specific things, none of which appeared in any conversation his financial advisor ever initiated. Number 1. Your savings account is a decision you are making every single month. The national average interest rate on a standard savings account is approximately 0.46%. Right now, 3-month Treasury bills pay approximately 3.7%. High-yield savings accounts from online banks pay between 4 and 5%. If you have $10,000 in a standard savings account, you're earning $46 per year. The same $10,000 in a high-yield savings account earns between $400 and $500 per year. The bank did not put you in the wrong account. You stayed there. Moving takes 15 minutes. Your bank is counting on the fact that most people never do it. Number 2. Understand the difference between owning a bond and owning a bond fund before you own either one. If you buy an individual Treasury bond directly from the United States government and hold it to maturity, you will receive every scheduled interest payment and your full principal back on the maturity date. Rates can rise 40 times between now and then. It does not affect what you receive. You get what was promised. A bond fund is completely different. A bond fund never matures. It is a constantly changing basket of bonds repriced every single day. When rates rise, the value of that basket falls and the loss appears on your statement immediately. It does not recover unless rates fall. David and Susan Harmon owned a bond fund, not individual bonds. That distinction, which takes 30 seconds to explain, was never explained to them in 35 years. Number 3. Look up the duration of every bond fund you own today. It is on the fund's fact sheet. It takes 30 seconds to find. It tells you exactly how much that fund drops for every 1% rise in interest rates. If your bond fund has a duration of 12 and rates rise 2 points, you are looking at roughly a 24% loss. That is not a projection. That is arithmetic. David Harmon's fund had a duration of 14. He found that number in 30 seconds after his phone call with the advisor. 30 seconds. 35 years too late. Number 4. If inflation is your specific concern, the government sells a product designed exactly for that purpose. Series 1 savings bonds are United States government bonds where the interest rate adjusts automatically with inflation every 6 months. In 2022, when inflation peaked, these bonds paid 9.62% annually. The same year that conventional bond funds lost 39%. Same government, completely different product. Completely different outcome. The limit is $10,000 per person per year purchased directly from the United States Treasury. That ceiling is a limitation. But for the money that fits within it, the inflation protection is direct and guaranteed. Number 5. Watch one number every week, the yield on the 10-year United States Treasury. It takes 5 seconds to find. It is published publicly every day, and it tells you more about your immediate financial future than almost any other single data point available to you. When the 10-year rises, your mortgage rate follows. Your car loan follows. Your employer's borrowing costs follow. When it rises sharply and the yield curve inverts, the bond market is telling you it sees trouble ahead. You do not need to trade bonds. You do not need a brokerage account. You just need to know what the number means when you see it. Because it was always there. It was always moving your life. The only thing that was missing was the translation. David and Susan Harmon did not lose $117,000 because they were reckless. They did not lose it because their advisor was corrupt. They did not lose it because the market did something unpredictable. They lost it because a word, duration, was never spoken to them until the morning after the damage was done. The bond market does not care whether you understand it. It does not pause while you catch up. It does not send a warning before it reprices your retirement. It moves. And whatever it moves takes your mortgage rate, your savings rate, your job security, and your retirement balance with it, whether you are watching or not. Ryan Kowalski signed a 30-year mortgage at 7.1% without knowing why. He will pay that rate for 30 years. The difference between 7.1% and 6.1% on a $400,000 mortgage is approximately $240 per month. That is $2,880 per year. That is $86,400 over 30 years. $86,400. The price of not knowing what the 10-year Treasury was doing when he walked into that closing, not his fault. Nobody told him to look. The machine that set his rate has been running his entire adult life. It ran through his first job, his first car loan, every rent increase he ever paid. He was always in the market, he just never got the manual. David Harmon is 63 years old now. He and Susan still have enough. The retirement is not ruined, but it is smaller than it should have been by $117,000 that 35 years of work built and 1 year of silence destroyed. He checks his duration every quarter now. He knows what the 10-year Treasury is doing. He moved part of their savings into a high-yield account 18 months ago and has earned more interest in 18 months than in the previous 8 years combined in their old savings account. He learned 5 things that took about 20 minutes to understand. He just learned them at 62 instead of 40. The system was not designed to tell him earlier. The system was designed to manage his money quietly and keep him comfortable. Comfortable is not the same as informed. And for David Harmon, the difference between those two things cost $117,000. You are not David Harmon. You still have time to learn the 5 things before you need them, before the statement arrives, before the rate rises, before the duration you never heard of does to your account what it did to his. The machine is going to keep running either way. The only variable is whether you can read it. Hit that subscribe button. Because this is exactly what we do here. Every couple of days, we pull back the curtain on the financial decisions that are quietly shaping your life so you can see them clearly and make better ones. No fluff, no shortcuts, just honest conversations about money that most people are too uncomfortable to have. You found this channel for a reason. The next one might change everything.